Hey, how's it going, class? I've gotten a lot of emails of people that are very nervous about the midterm exam. They're nervous about how they're doing in the class. They're nervous in general. So, um, the midterm exam's coming up, so anxiety is high, right? So what I did was I looked at the midterm exam without anything else, without any homework, without just everything goes to the side. Let's just look at the midterm. I can do that. You can't yet. Just looking at the midterm, what do you need to know? What questions do you need to know? So moving all of my lab, just let it go. Moving all of those videos that we have in the course, let them go. Textbook, everything, just clear it. Looking right at the exam, what do you need to know? I wrote a list of things that I think you need to know, okay? So if you have an interest in what you need to know, this would be the video for you. If you're not interested, then uh, hit stop and stop listening to me, okay? So I wrote a list. What can I say about the midterm exam? It's done through Canvas. It's not on my lab. Okay, so the structure is on my lab. So you'll be answering questions on my lab. Um, now the structure of that, in my opinion, is exactly the same as the review. And when I made this list, I didn't even look at the review. I didn't look at the homework. I didn't look at the review. I just made a list of things you need to know that are on the exam. Now, the exam can generate different versions of different problems. So this isn't an exact guarantee that you could, you know, you need to know this, but actually it's this. So there is some variation, okay? But I made a list of things I think you should study. Okay, so after I made the list, it's a long story, but this is how I came to it. After I made the list of looking at the exam, of this is what you need to study, then I looked at the review for the first time. So, me as the instructor for Ivy Tech Online, I looked at the midterm, what do you need to know? Then I looked at the review and I almost couldn't tell them apart. They are so close you can't believe it. The review is very close to the real midterm exam. So if you're having trouble with the review, you're going to have trouble with the exam. If you're having a very easy time with the review, I can't promise that you'll have an easy time with the midterm, but I don't think you'd be thrown too many surprises. There are many problems on the review that look nearly exact copies to my eye for the midterm. So that is what you need to know. Okay. So I wrote out this list, and if you're looking at the announcement, you have the potential of seeing that typed out, which I did type it out. But this is the original list I made. And the first thing I noticed was solve an absolute value equation. Solving an absolute value equation. So solving an equation, first off, what you would do is you isolate the variable x equals 2, right? That's what we do. When you solve an absolute value equation, generally what you do is you want to isolate the absolute value and then take both cases. What if the inside was positive? What if it was negative? And then you can solve for that. So sometimes you get two answers, sometimes you get one answer. You could get no solution. That's possible. But when I solve absolute value equations, I generally take the two cases. I isolate the absolute value expression and then say, what if the inside was negative? What if it was positive? And then I move on. Okay. Solving the absolute value inequality is something you need to know for the midterm exam. And I do it generally the same. The algebra can be a little different because it's inequality. I typically will go back and test. I like to test for the inequality to make sure. I should do that for equations as well, but I generally don't. Maybe we all should. So for inequality, I usually test to make sure that that's right. I might even draw out my number line. Okay. So those two things are on the review, and I think you should know how to do them. I noticed that there were a problem or two about the geometry of area and the geometry of perimeter. So this is dealing with rectangles. It's not all shapes. From what I can see, um, those should be reviewed. If you haven't reviewed them before, you should know how to find the area of a rectangle. You should be able to find the perimeter. If I give you one, could you find the other? That kind of thing. Okay. So that would be good to know. Solving quadratics by factoring, that's a vague statement. There's a lot of factoring techniques out there. If the leading coefficient is 1 versus if the leading coefficient is not 1, can you still factor it? If the leading coefficient is 1, can you factor it using just factoring the constant term? Or do you have to go further? Um, if the leading coefficient is not 1, can you factor that out? Is that possible? Greatest common factor. Is it possible to use AC method? Those types of questions you need to know. Solving quadratics by using the quadratic formula. Quadratic formula comes from completing the square generally, and then from that, we derive the quadratic formula. You should know the quadratic formula by rote memorization. You need to know it, and that will be on the test, okay? Simplifying complex numbers. This is a way of breaking those complex numbers up and then writing them in the A plus BI format. If you can do that, you should be fine. Occasionally, we have problems where we need to um, multiply both top and bottom by a complex conjugate. That can come up, and then those are the more complicated versions of types of problems like that, where you have to multiply top and bottom by complex conjugate to be able to break the complex number into an A plus BI format. That could come up. Solving radical equations. This is usually done by squaring both sides. You want to have practice on the different versions of problems where that could come up. Um, Complicated problems I've seen in the past of teaching college algebra, where if you have three terms and they're all radical expressions, squaring both sides can be quite involved. I don't know that you would need to worry about that. I haven't seen that on the review myself, but that would be the more complicated. Generally, solving radical equations, we square both sides. Solving an equation in quadratic form. I mean, those are not too bad, especially going back if you know you're factoring and quadratic formula. Those aren't too bad. What is a function? Is the given function or is the given relation a function? So that comes back to what is a function? Um, let's think of x squared. So x squared, I could plug in -1 or +1. I can plug anything I want into x squared. But if I plug in -1 into x squared, I get 1. If I plug in 1 into x squared, I get 1. So that's a repeat for the output. That's okay. But going back, we're only plugging in one number. Okay. So that is a function. X squared is a function. That's fine. What's not a function is y squared equals x. That's not. You can't have two outputs for a single input. That's not going to work. But you can have um, two inputs for a single output. That's confusing, so then we say it's the vertical line test. But if you were just given a relationship, you just want to be sure that you're not getting um, where you could plug a number in and you get two outputs. So if I plug in the number 2 into a function, I shouldn't get two numbers out. I shouldn't, right? I shouldn't do that. So you'll want to review that. It's in the review as well, so that's okay. From a graph, state the interval of the function is increasing or decreasing. If I'm just looking at a graph, where is it increasing? Well, you can just think slope. If the slope is positive, if it's increasing, if I'm walking up the mountain, that's increasing. If I'm going down the hill, that's decreasing. And I should be able to state in interval notation where that's occurring. Okay. If you're going on to calculus, that's very common that we do that all the time in calculus. So increasing, decreasing from graph, it's on there. You should be able to do it. You should also understand that you put parentheses if you're doing interval notation. You put parentheses around that as opposed to um, brackets because you wouldn't include the point when you're increasing or decreasing. You're doing it over the interval. So you should be able to know that. State the local max and min as ordered pairs. So the XY point, that's what ordered pair is, the XY point. That's something to keep in mind. You should be able to identify from a graph what the local maximum. If you go on to take calculus, you'll be able to derive the local maximum. Okay. Describe transformations of a given function. If I give you the function x squared, okay, if I give you the function x squared, can you explain to me what a reflection vertical and horizontal is? Can you explain what a stretch and a compression is? Can you explain what a shift is, both vertical and horizontal? Can you describe those? Okay. Can you go backwards? If I give you a function, can you tell me, well, based off of x squared, this has been shifted to the right by 2. This has been shifted down by 2. This has been compressed by 2. This has been reflected around the x-axis. Can you understand those things from a basic function that we might work with? Those are the types of transformations we'll be thinking about. Find the vertex of the quadratic function. So if they give you something like ax squared plus bx plus c, find the vertex. It's negative b over 2a. We've done a lot of that. You plug that value back into the original function, and that tells you the output, okay? If they give it to you in vertex form, that's dead easy. A harder problem would be to find the vertex form of a quadratic that's in general. That would be a little bit more difficult. Graph the quadratic by plotting the vertex and the intercepts. X and y intercepts, can you find them? X-intercept implies that y equals 0. Y-intercept implies that x equals 0. You can find those. Finding the vertex, negative b over 2a, and then plugging it in. Or if they give it to you vertex form, you can just look at it, and that's really easy. Solving the quadratic inequality, a little bit hard. You have to be up on your factoring, or you have to be up on quadratic formula. You need to know that. Um, and then again, with inequalities, I like to test. I like to test regions. I like to test points, that kind of thing. Find the zeros and multiplicity of a polynomial function. Fundamental theorem of algebra is that whatever the degree of the polynomial, or one of the statements is uh, the degree of the polynomial is that many zeros, but you could have multiplicity. Multiplicity is like repeats. So if there's an x squared involved, there's 2 zeros at 0. 0 squared, that kind of thing. That can come up. If you have something like x minus 3, then there's a 0 at 3. So that would be a multiplicity of 1. Those types of problems. Find the graph and find the function. Or from the graph. I can't even read my own handwriting. From the graph, find the function. So if they give you a graph, can you find the function? It's pretty general, but you can assume it's going to be something that we've dealt with a lot, like a line or a parabola or um, a quadratic, which would be a parabola. A radical equation might come up. Those types of things. Okay, so I think the review is dead on. The review has tons of videos. If you're struggling with one concept, you have unlimited attempts for your review. So I think if you absolutely master the review, take it a few times, I think you would be in good shape. I mean, you can mark my words, you can come after me if that's dead wrong, but I think that is the truth. And as far as formulas, I could only find one formula you would need to know, and that's the quadratic formula. That's the only thing I would need to know to use to be able to do it. Okay? If you have specific questions, I would like you to reach out. You never need to hesitate to ask me a math question ever, 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 ever. So just reach out if you have any questions. Um, but if I was studying for the final, or not, for the midterm exam, I would look at the review. I think the review is the key. Okay. But again, if you have questions, comments, concerns about any kind of math question, send them my way. I would be happy to help. I wish you well, okay?